Make sure you guys hit the subscribe button if you guys are enjoying the content that we're throwing up. And make sure you guys hit the like button if you enjoy the video. And yeah, let's begin. What's going on, guys? This is Rob, and before we get into this video, for the Twitch stream, the Comics Explained Twitch stream, where we basically just stream the videos 24/7, we've got a schedule now. And so if you go to twitch.tv/comicsexplained, you'll see a schedule down there, but you can also type !schedule, and that will pull up what the schedule is, right? So it'll tell you what that week's video is. We're also going to do a live Q&A session every Friday at 6:30 p.m., and then a watch party at 7:30 p.m., right? Like watching comic book movies and different things like that together. You do need Amazon Prime to be able to do it, but yeah, so it's cool, right? So twitch.tv/comicsexplained, it's a cool concept. I like it. I think it's pretty awesome. I love talking to you guys, right? Like I was in there for like 7 hours yesterday and we made up like a comic book video game. It's basically Skyrim meets Marvel Comics. It's amazing. But yeah, so this Three Jokers story is ridiculously good, right? Like it's crazy how good it is. And here's the thing, a little bit of history here for those of you guys who are kind of coming into this and you're like, okay, I don't remember everything that's going on. So this really comes out of the events of what was basically Darkseid War, right? Like kind of like this revelation when Batman was on the Mobius chair, which was the chair that granted him absolute knowledge. And he asked the question, who's the Joker? And we were told there's 3 of them. And what we were basically given here was what was essentially the original Joker, right? So the old like Bob Kane, Bill Finger Joker. Then we have the Killing Joke Joker. And then we have the Silver Age Joker, right? So we've got like 3 of them running around, 3 Jokers from 3 different eras. And at this point, we're just now learning what all this is about, right? Like 3 or 4 years after it was all kind of teased. But what this does is it basically picks up with Batman, right? Inside the Batcave, basically receiving treatment for, having been out for, fighting crime that night, really kind of the run-of-the-mill stuff. But the cool thing about this, right, this art is done by Jason Fabok. He's probably one of the greatest artists in the entirety of comic book artistry, and of course written by Jeff Johns. But you have this thing where like Batman's basically being tended to by Alfred, and we get these scars of Batman, right? Like the scar on his back where Bane broke his back, a scar where he was basically burned by the Riddler, where he was scratched by Catwoman, where he was bit by Killer Croc, he was stabbed by the Scarecrow, he was shot by Joker, just like all these different scars. But the cool thing about this is we're given like these different injuries at the hands of various Jokers over the years, right? The 3 different Jokers, right? Where he was sprayed with the acid lapel, where he was cut with a playing card. Like it's kind of cool, right? Because we get this little bit of a flashback to like the early days of Batman, the very early days of Bruce, right? Where you have Bruce and his family walking out of the Mask of Zorro movie. Bruce is excited about it. He's like, yeah, man, it's like the coolest thing ever. And then they end up down a dark alley because his dad wanted to take a shortcut and his parents were shot by Joe Chill. This is a little bit of an origin for Bruce. Now, this is kind of, if I had to be honest, it's kind of Jeff Johns just being like, let's get to the humanity of all of this, right? Like, let's break Bruce down to his most base form, right? Who is Bruce? He's a sad little kid crying because his mom and his daddy got shot, right? That's one of the best lines from like Batman Begins, but like where Bruce Wayne, like after his parents are killed, he goes to like Tom Wilkinson, who's in like that bar, that really seedy bar, and he's like, there's a congressman, and there's a judge, and so on and so forth. And he's like, you think because your mommy and your daddy got shot that you understand what this life is like? Like you've never tasted desperate, right? Like you're Bruce Wayne, you're the Prince of Gotham. You'd have to drive 1,000 miles to find someone who doesn't know your name. Like I love that line, right? Because it perfectly encapsulates Bruce Wayne, right? He's just a little rich kid whose mommy and daddy got shot, and now he understands the criminal underworld. Like it's cool because in the early days that was not the case. Now in the midst of all this, they're suddenly met by the arrival of a broadcast. It says that like the Moxon crime family were all executed at a restaurant essentially, and the execution was done at the hands of the Joker. The next thing that really goes on here is that we switch over to Batgirl, and while Batgirl's exercising, we end up getting this news footage of a comedian who was executed by the Joker. And it's kind of cool because for her, she basically hits at this idea of her having been shot by the Joker during Killing Joke, which the reason why this Joker's kind of considered separate from the other ones is because originally Killing Joke was not part of the DC continuity, right? It was a story that was just out there by itself somewhere, but it was wildly popular when it came out, right? When it was released, and even now, it's still considered to be the definitive origin of the Joker. But the idea is that Barbara Gordon kind of relives a time when she was shot by the Joker just to basically torture her and to show her tortured images to Jim Gordon to prove that he could make Jim Gordon go insane. But the next thing it does is it switches over to something that I totally did not expect. It switches to the Red Hood, right? It switches over to Jason Todd. And you have Jason Todd here who's basically facing off against some henchmen, right? Just beating the crap out of these guys, all the while reliving these memories when the Joker beat him to death. right? When the Joker basically killed him. Now, again, as most of you guys probably know, this was in response to the fact that DC fans didn't like Jason Todd, right? That when Dick Grayson was brought onto the scene in the old Detective Comics stories, and he was the first Robin and the sidekick of Batman for, something like 30 years or something like that, when DC finally rolled him over and made him Nightwing, when he was basically aged up, they wanted to keep the element of Robin, right? So they brought in Jason Todd. The problem was that Jason Todd's origin story was like identical to Dick Grayson's, and fans didn't like it because they thought that it was DC just kind of throwing away the story of Dick for the purpose of just like creating another version of his character. And so what this did is it led to DC killing Jason Todd. But the Red Hood's here because he's basically interrogating the guys of the Joker, right? He's interrogating his henchmen and is like, tell me where the Joker is. But the next thing we do is we pick up with this kind of death of these individuals at the Ace Chemical Factory. And you've got like Jim Gordon and you've got Harvey Bullock and you've got these guys responding and kind of looking over this whole scene. Batman, of course, ends up showing up here. And the reason why is because what's happened is that over the course of a single night, all three Jokers struck, right? The Moxon crime family, the Ace Chemical Factory being robbed, and the comedian being killed. This all happened in one night. And that's where like Harvey Bullock and Jim Gordon and them were like, okay, this doesn't make any sense, right? There's no way the Joker could have done all three of these things. He'd have to be in three places at once. The only way it's true is if there's three of the Jokers running around. And notice this, the immediate answer here is, okay, well, if there is more than one Joker, then you have one Joker and two imposters. That's the knee-jerk throwaway reaction. But you basically end up having Batman essentially talking to somebody, and of course the cops think he's more or less lost his mind, only for us to find out he's talking to Batgirl. And that this Ace Chemical, this vat basically, is the one the Joker originally fell into back in like Batman #1, or really kind of, not really Batman #1 definitively, but the original Joker fell into this vat of Ace Chemicals and became the Joker, right? So it has significance, it has meaning, only for us to find out that one of these guys is basically still alive, right? One of these individuals who was kind of doused in the chemicals and so on is still alive. The other part of this is that we end up finding out that when it came to these three particular crimes, the Joker wanted people to know he did them. It's why, like, when he was walking through this Ace Chemical Factory, he looked at every single security camera that was working. It's why he live streamed one of the murders. In every single one of these cases, he wanted people to know he was there. So people would kind of look and it would literally drive them crazy and say like, what in the world is going on here? Now for these three bodies that were here, these are just a distraction. It's designed to keep the cops focusing on them as opposed to focusing on the tire tracks. Of course, Batman picks up on that, but with this one guy being alive, he's thrown into an ambulance and basically begun to, they start the purpose of getting him to the hospital, only for us to find out that inside the ambulance is Jason Todd, right? Is the Red Hood, who immediately grabs this guy and like starts getting to work on him and is like, tell me everything you know. Now, here's the cool thing. This is what I love so much about this, right? I firmly believe that in DC Comics right now, no one can write Batman characters the way that Jeff Johns can. Scott Snyder is really good at like world building, right? He's good at like building a mythos. I think Jeff Johns is, a little better than that, proven by the nature of like the Green Lantern mythos. But Scott Snyder's good at writing a particular kind of story, the creepy Batman. But in terms of writing Batman as we imagine him, right? Like this dark, brooding character. When you think of like Jason Todd, as like this hardcore vigilante, Jeff Johns knocks it out of the park here, right? Like he smashes it out of the park, because when Batman breaks into the ambulance, right, and confronts the Red Hood and Batman get into like a little bit of a scuffle, right? This leads to Barbara Gordon basically using a kind of drill of sorts attached to the wheel of her motorcycle and then taking out the tires. But then we switch over to this truck, right? We switch over to the Ace Chemical truck, which is taken and then driven into like this kind of wooded area. And then you end up having, of course, like the Joker getting out of it, the Joker walking into a house, or at least walking up to a house. He knocks on the door and he's met by the Killing Joke Joker, right? So you got two Jokers here. And so you kind of have them, going back and forth a little bit, just kind of being goofy, telling jokes, but it's designed to showcase the nature of their personalities. It's designed to show that like this Silver Age Joker was more cartoonish, right? This guy was a little more silly. Now, the reality is that this version of the Joker was in a lot of ways the one that like Steve Englehart's Joker was based on. It's the one that Batman the Animated Series Joker was based on. He was a little more sadistic than those versions, but like it's kind of that version of the Joker in a lot of ways. And then Killing Joke Joker is the one who's like dark. There's something about him that's just like, he's really, really dark, right? Like he's hiding a monster inside, right? Worse than anything we've seen, right? It just looks very sinister. But of course they get inside the house and, basically Killing Joke Joker tells, Killing Joke Joker tells Silver Age Joker, wait until you see what the boss has cooked up. And that's what you end up getting. You kind of end up getting, these two Jokers talking to the original Joker. This is the old school Batman #1 Joker. Now look how old he looks. That's one of the first things that hit me. This guy looks old. He's been playing the part for a while. But basically he tells him like, we're going to split into groups, right? Like we're going to split up and we're all going to go achieve a goal, right? We're all going to do something. And so basically you end up having Batman and you have Jason Todd and you have Barbara Gordon who team up, because each of them going after a Joker alone is basically suicide because of how dangerous the Joker is. The only real way for them to seemingly pull this off is to team up on one Joker after another, right? To, all three of them hit one Joker, all three of them hit another, and then the three of them hit the last one. And that flies in the face of conventional wisdom, because historically speaking, they would have gone through individually and then like faced off against different characters, right? So like something seems a little amiss, like something seems a little strange, but it's the smartest move to make. But getting into the Gotham City Aquarium, we end up finding out that like this is where the Silver Age Joker's been, because what we end up getting here are basically the Joker fish, right? The laughing fish, the fish that have been infected with the Joker toxin. Not only that, and this is probably the single creepiest thing that I think I've ever seen in my life, a laughing shark. This is horrifying. And even Jason Todd's like, dude, that's new. That's new. Like, that's a little bonkers. But of course, then you end up having like some Silver Age henchmen who basically show up here. You end up having Gaggy, who was just kind of like, he was almost like Joker's own little Robin to a degree. It was kind of weird and a little twisted, but they basically end up, kind of going and going after Batman, because they've basically been tasked to do so by the Silver Age Joker. Now, notice as they get into this fight, there's gunshots being pulled. There's gunshots going, and those gunshots going are shooting into the tank. They're literally starting to crack the glass, right? And what this does is it leads to Jason Todd shooting the glass out of the tank. The shark comes flying out, right? It's just like this. I mean, sharks don't roar, but like, whoa, like it comes flying out and then like eats Gaggy, right? And then the Joker comes out of nowhere and basically launches his attack on like Batman and the Bat family. Now, the fact that the Joker comes running up on them with a bowl, like with a fish bowl full of the laughing fish, this is Silver Age Joker. This is the kind of stuff he did, right? This is the kind of comedic, goofy, nonsensical stuff that the Joker did back in the day. Like, that's just the way he was during the Silver Age. He's immediately incapacitated by Batman and the Bat family, right? Now, this right here is our biggest clue that something bigger is going on, because of what sense would it make to have the story have like a 3-issue story about the 3 Jokers and like they're all taken out in the first story? What kind of sense would that make, right? That'd be a little weird. You have like Commissioner Gordon and you have Harvey Bullock who chime in and say like, we got the other one, and it looks like the one that they took out was the Killing Joke Joker, although we don't really see specifically which one it is. But it's like, okay, so like he literally tells Jason Todd, right? He tells Red Hood and he tells Batgirl, keep this guy roped up. You guys know how the Joker is. He's always got something up his sleeve. Like, keep this guy away. Like make sure he's tied up, make sure he doesn't have a means of escape or anything like that. And it's one of these things where you end up having Red Hood who like pulls out one of the Joker's playing cards, and the Joker tries to spray him with like his acid lapel, but then he starts taunting Jason. And this is the smartest thing. This is what made Silver Age Joker so cool and so sadistic. If you go and you read like the old Silver Age comics of the Joker, right? If you go and you read this version of the Joker that we saw that basically existed between like the onset of the Silver Age and like the beginning of like the Crisis events, right? Like Infinite Crisis, Final Crisis, right? If you look at this version of the Joker, if you look past the silliness, if you look past the nonsense of it, he's wildly dangerous and he's incredibly smart. Like if you look past all that stuff, the way he's written, he's amazing. And he was really good at getting in your head. He was really good at like getting in heroes' heads and screwing with them. And that's what he does with Jason, right? He's like, it's kind of interesting. When Jason goes to pull a gun and Barbara's like, like, don't do this, Batman wouldn't do this, the response to the Joker is, I mean, you're right, like Batman wouldn't do this, but Batman's not here, is he? Look at the facts. Let's look at what's really going on. Like, I killed this guy. I beat you with a crowbar, I blew you up, and the mistake you made, Jason, was believing that you mattered in all of it. That's the mistake you made. You believed that I did that because I was targeting you. No, I was never targeting you, Jason Todd. You're collateral damage. You were bait. I was targeting you to target him. I was hitting at you to get to Batman. And then he starts kind of making fun of him, right? He starts poking at him and basically saying like, you're basically my Robin now. That's really what you are. I mean, look at yourself. You exist in Gotham, you take people's lives, you make Batman's life an absolute living hell. Like, you're my Robin. You're my henchman. You became everything that I hoped you would. You're my henchman now. You're me. It's like, dude, like I never looked at it that way. And it's the craziest thing because he tells him, he's like, do you remember what you said when I was beating you with that crowbar, when I was killing you? Do you remember what you said? You said, please, why are stop doing this? I'll tell you anything you want if you stop. And it's kind of nuts because like when we're getting that little bit of history there, Jason Todd starts to cry, right? Because it's super personal. This is Jason Todd's version of like his mom and dad being shot, right? The death of Jason Todd at the hands of the Joker is far more potent because, I mean, if you go and you look at like the original origin, right? Like when he first appeared in DC Comics, his origin was the same as Dick Grayson, but that origin doesn't really count anymore. And so now it's basically like Jason Todd was an orphan. something, somewhere along the line. So this is like a super personal thing, right? He's being made to relive the single biggest trauma in his life. And I love the way this is being handled, right? I absolutely love the way that Jeff Johns is doing this. It makes Red Hood so personal. And if I'm being honest with you guys, I feel like this personal touch of Red Hood has been missing from DC Comics for a long time. It's one of the reasons why I stopped reading the Red Hood comics, right? Because I feel like the actual core, who really is Jason Todd, and let's focus on that, has been gone for a while. The stories have been cool and he's been shooting a lot of stuff up, but it's almost kind of been like mindless action, like mindless violence, as opposed to like the character, like focusing on the nature of the Red Hood. There's been a few stories here and there that have kind of shifted that up a bit, but like being written like this, it's amazing to see. And Jason Todd has enough, right? Like literally Red Hood has enough. And so you have Barbara Gordon watching Jason Todd and she's like, okay, literally his hand's shaking. And it's like, he's literally falling in line with like the Killing Joker's philosophy, right? Like all it takes is one bad day. And it's like, he's sitting there shaking and Barbara Gordon's like, oh my God, he's going to do it. And like Jason Todd doesn't want to, but like he does it. He pulls the trigger. Barbara Gordon throws a batarang and misses. And Jason Todd shoots the Joker through the head. Like he kills the Joker who killed him. And it's just like, holy cow. And Barbara Gordon's like, what did you do? What did you do? And Jason's like, I ended it, right? Like I finally ended this. Like I finally killed the Joker. And Barbara Gordon storms out, right? Because she's like, he's like, dude, you wanted this as much as I did. And she's like, no, I didn't want any of this. And he says, let me ask you something, Barbara Gordon. When was the last time you missed when you threw your batarang? And it seems to be that like she did kind of want that. Like she did sort of want the Joker to die, like on some super personal level that she's not willing to admit to herself. She wanted that version of the Joker to die. And so like, she's like, screw you. Like she ultimately ends up storming off. And as Jason Todd just sort of staring over this body, he simply says like, I hope that's the right one, right? Like I really hope this is the right Joker. All right, guys, we are picking back up again with the 3 Jokers. And again, if you guys haven't bought this, you really need to, right? Like this is one of these stories that you really need to buy and just sit at home and read, right? Like we're coming up on the fall anyway. So those of you guys who live anywhere but like the Southwest, you guys know it's getting around to that time of year where it's just a great time to like buy some comic books and just read, right? Like you guys know what I'm talking about. But it's ridiculously amazing. And at the end of this, I actually have a question for you guys. Hopefully I'll remember to ask it. But what we end up doing here is we pick up initially with the comedian who basically arrives home. Now, this is kind of cool because the idea behind the comedian, the way this kind of played out here is we had different iterations of the Joker, right? We had 3 versions of the Joker. We had the criminal, we had the clown, and we had the comedian. The clown was the one who shot Barbara Gordon during the Killing Joke, right? That's the way it seemed to kind of point out, or seemed to be the direction that they were going in. The comedian is the one that we have here, and the criminal is like the classic Joker. And the way this goes down is you basically have this, this comedian, the comedian basically, showing up at his home, right? Showing up there to meet his wife and to meet his kid. And this is kind of the weird thing here because it almost kind of points to the idea that this is the guy who shot Barbara Gordon, right? Like this comedian is the one who shot Barbara, that the clown was not the one who killed Barbara Gordon. It seems to be kind of like Jeff Johns sort of throwing that out there, right? Kind of introducing that idea to us. But you get this scenario where you basically have a meeting with his wife and basically talking to their kid. Now, the reason why I say that is because those of you guys who remember the story, The Killing Joke, this woman looks a lot like his wife, right? She looks a lot like the wife of the Joker before he became the Joker in The Killing Joke. And she was pregnant. So it's kind of one of these things of like, what happens if she didn't die, right? What happened if she wasn't killed by the criminals? Joker still became Joker, but like she wasn't killed by the criminals and he just kind of went on living his life as the Joker with like a family and all that kind of stuff. Well, it's pretty screwed up, to be honest with you, right? Like the little kid's like, why can't we just leave? And she's like, we can't, like he'll come after us, he'll find us, that kind of a thing. She's like, you need to come down to dinner. You got to play your part, right? You got to play the role. It's the only way for us to basically survive this whole ordeal. And so what you end up getting is this really, really strange kind of dinner, right? It's not wildly crazy like, the New 52 Death of the Family, right? Where like they're eating with their faces cut off, or at least they believe their faces are cut off. It's just like a very tense and terrifying situation because nobody knows what goes on in the Joker's head, right? Like the Joker could just arbitrarily kill you and it wouldn't make sense to anybody but himself. But at the end of the day, that's all he really cares about. It makes sense to him and that's all that really matters. The other part of this is that they're having octopus for dinner. And while the kid doesn't really like octopus, the Joker's like, okay, well, let's see if we can't turn that frown upside down, right? What do you call octopus triplets that look exactly alike? A tentacle, which is kind of weird. But the Joker just cracks up laughing. And if I'm being honest with you guys, I think it's funny because of the Joker, right? Like here's a question I want to ask you guys. In the old Batman the Animated Series cartoon show where you had Mark Hamill voicing the Joker, how many of you guys would laugh when the Joker laughed because you just couldn't help it? That was me. I just couldn't help it. It was just funny. It was hilarious listening to him laugh. But we basically end up snapping back to reality, right? And you've got the criminal who basically asks, comedian, who were you talking to? Like what are you doing here? And he's like, I was having dinner. And he asks with whom? And he says, with myself. And it's kind of an interesting thing, because he's like, well, you're basically wasting time, right? Like, the problem that you have is nobody else out there matters except for Batman, right? It was your idea to let him in on our little secret, right? To give him a trail to follow, to make it more fun. And now one of us is dead, right? You basically led the Bat family to one of us, to the clown, and you got him killed. And it's kind of nuts here, because looking at the first video that we did, the way this played out is Jeff Johns kind of pointed at the idea that the clown was the one who killed Jason Todd, and the comedian was the one who shot Barbara Gordon. That was kind of like the way this worked, right? It was kind of him basically saying, here are the Jokers that you know. And it's kind of wild, because with this going down, you basically pick up with Jim Gordon, and you kind of have this apartment that belongs to a judge where the dogs are all Joker infected, right? Which sounds horrifying, right? They look like Rottweilers or pit bulls. They look like Rottweilers, to be honest, but they're infected by Joker toxin, right? So Batman gets in there, Batman knocks him out, but it's one of these things where you basically end up finding out that this guy was, at least it was believed, that he was mauled to death by his own dogs. And in some ways he was, but he was also exposed to the Joker toxin. And it's one of these things where it's a question that's kind of being asked here. Why is Judge Walls the person here, right? Why is Judge Walls the person who's dead? This doesn't really make any sense. And the response of Batman is, well, when Jim Gordon says he retired years ago, the response of Batman was he didn't retire, he was forced out, right? He was a dirty judge. He was taking bribes from the old Arkham officials to send criminals to Arkham Asylum, right? So no big loss that this judge is gone, right? He was a bad judge, he was a dirty judge. The world's probably better off without him. But it's one of these things where at the end of the day, Barbara Gordon basically walks in, and where Jim Gordon's like, I thought you were escorting one of the Jokers, the response of Barbara is, I need to talk to Batman. And when he asks where's the Red Hood, she says, it's like, well, Commissioner Gordon's like, you guys are looking for the Red Hood too? And Batman's like, the Red Hood's not a criminal. And that's when Barbara says, yes, he is. And there's kind of this unwritten communication here that's I need to talk to you right now, right? So you basically end up having the two of them take off. Batman in the Batmobile, Barbara Gordon on her little bat cycle, whatever it is. And they kind of have this thing where Barbara's like, he killed the Joker. He killed one of them. What are we going to do about this? And Batman does not take the approach that you think he would. You think Batman would say, okay, then let's go grab Jason Todd. We're not going to kill him or anything, but we're going to take him. We're going to take him to some place where he can't escape from, right? We'll finish the rest of this out, and then we'll basically go through and then we'll deal with Jason Todd and find out why he did what he did, right? But that Joker's already dead. There's not much to be done. Saving Gotham's more important. And while Batman does take that approach to a degree, he actually tries to rationalize the actions of Jason Todd, and saying, that when Barbara Gordon's like, now we have to deal with two more Jokers and the Red Hood because we don't know where he is. We can't find him. He's out there in Gotham somewhere, and Red Hood cannot be found if he does not want to be found, right? He knows us. He knows exactly what we would do and how we would look for them, and he knows how to dodge us. But Batman kind of responds and saying he killed a Joker, Barbara. That's all we know, right? All we know is that we killed a Joker, and there, that he killed a Joker. And there's this kind of back and forth, right? That where Barbara Gordon is just kind of no, he shot a human being tied to a chair. That's a problem. The response of Batman is, the Joker hurt him, right? He healed wrong. He got more violent. You got stronger. And Batman kind of tries to rationalize this and basically saying there's something wrong with Jason Todd. That's why he did what he did. Almost kind of making this argument, it's not really Jason's fault that he did what he did. Now, he doesn't say it in so many words, but it kind of looks like that's more or less an argument that he's creating. And Batman kind of looks at that and says I've never forgiven myself for leaving him in that grave, right? Because when Jason Todd died in the original Death in the Family storyline, when he died in that, he was for all intents and purposes dead, right? I mean, that's kind of how it was. Batman put him in the ground, Batman buried him. The fact that Jason Todd was actually alive did not become a thing until you got to Under the Red Hood / Infinite Crisis. And the big question that Barbara Gordon had is that if Batman believes he should talk to Jason Todd and understand him, then it turns into, why are you doing it now, right? Jason Todd's been back all this time. Why are you just now at a point where you believe he needs to be talked to? Now, here's the big issue that we have with the three Jokers, right? We don't know when this story takes place. And that's really the big question that a lot of you guys have. I saw you got a lot of you guys asking that in the previous video. When does this story take place? Because Red Hood has his own story arc going on right now that has nothing to do with this. When does this take place? Does it take, is this a story that basically takes place at the very beginning of DC Rebirth? And if you want to do a great big chronology, you would just put this at the very beginning of the chronology, right? So read it once you read DC Universe Rebirth #1, right? I mean, is that what this is? Like, we don't really know where it fits in. We don't know if it takes place before Doomsday Clock, after Doomsday Clock. We don't really know. We're not really given a definitive answer here because it was a story that looks like it was supposed to be written years ago. But the whole point behind this is that you basically end up picking up with Red Hood. Now, I love the way that Jeff Johns writes Red Hood. And Jeff Johns is one of the few writers that can write Jason Todd incredibly well, right? He's one of the few writers that can do that. He basically writes him in kind of the classic Red Hood fashion. And people who were fans of Jason Todd, right, whether they got on board before or whether like they're super old school, right, so they've been reading since like the 70s, or they got on board with like Under the Red Hood and they've been following him ever since. But I have to imagine you guys love the way Red Hood's depicted here, right? Because it's classic Jason Todd. This guy like literally grabs one of the Joker's henchmen and just snatches him up. And it's like, you guys were basically told to find a place to hide a whole lot of chemicals. So you better have a good response. Where did you hide them? Where did you put them? And this guy is just kind of like, I can't say, like, I'm not going to tell you because if I do, the Joker's going to do worse than me, right? Like he would do worse. Like he would do worse than anything you could do, right? He would kill me in the worst possible way. And the response of Jason is, you don't have to tell me. Detectives in the hood are already picking it up, right? It's basically pool cleaner. Now, this is where you kind of defect from classic Red Hood. If this was the Under the Red Hood story, if it was like that version of the Red Hood, he would have killed this guy like that. He would have been like, well, now I'm done with you. Pow! And then like that would have been the end of it, right? Instead, he's like, we're going to hand you over to the cops. And this is kind of cool because Jeff Johns plays on this idea that Jason Todd understands the severity of what it meant to kill that Joker. And he's trying not to fall down that slippery slope, right? Which is one of those important things when people kind of make the argument, well, if Batman killed a guy, then Batman would become as bad as the criminals. Only if he allowed himself to be. You can stop. The slippery slope argument is like saying just because you sit down at a casino table one time means you're never going to get up again and you're going to turn into a degenerate gambler. That's not true. That's not true at all. Basically saying people are not in control of themselves, right? It's a really good way to absolve yourself of responsibility, right? And so with that being the case, it's one of these things where Batman's kind of like, okay, we'll try to find Jason Todd, but at the moment we can't find him, right? We tried tracking him, we can't locate him because he doesn't want to be found. And so he basically says we're going to go someplace else. And they end up going to Blackgate, right? Now the reason why they go to Blackgate is because of the fact that Batman says that there were fingerprints that were found on the body of Judge Walls. And when Barbara asks, who do these fingerprints belong to? Batman's response is Joe Chill. Right now, as soon as he gets into Blackgate prison, actually one of the inmates here is Rupert Thorne, which is awesome to see. Rupert Thorne is old school. He's super old school. He was part of the old Steve Englehart Batman run, and I think that's where he was introduced, although I'm not going to swear to it. But of course, you end up picking up with like the cell of Joe Chill. When Batman gets in there, he kind of chokes up for a second, right? He's like, you know who, you know who I am, right? He kind of gets caught up in the moment, right? Like it really shows that Batman is still afraid of Joe Chill. It's a very small and a very nuanced thing. It can be kind of easy to miss, but that's exactly what it is. Batman is still afraid of Joe Chill. And it's like, damn, right? Like he still really is just a little kid crying over the fact that his mommy and his daddy got shot. But as soon as he gets into the cell, Joe Chill's gone. And that's when Barbara shows up and says like, they moved him, right? Like he's basically sick. And you end up finding out that he's in the hospital wing and he's got weeks to live because he's dying of stage 4 cancer. And so the question becomes, if Joe Chill's dying of cancer, how did somebody get their hands on his fingerprints and how did they get those fingerprints to the body of Judge Walls, right? Now, that can be done in any variety of ways, right? The Joker could just sneak in here, pretending to be like a doctor, hide his hair, right? Put like a mask over his face or something like that. Like what's his name did in The Dark Knight, right? What Heath Ledger did, pretend to be a nurse. It was the ugliest damn nurse I ever saw in my life, but pretend to be a nurse, right? And then basically walk in there and steal the guy's fingerprints, right? Just put some tape on his fingerprints and then put it on a crime scene somewhere. It's not hard to do. Nonetheless, Batman kind of picks up on this and where Barbara asked the question, like, what's the connection, right? Between the Joker and Joe Chill and like everything else besides you, like what's the connection there? And so we end up finding out here is that Jason Todd had basically accessed the back computers from his helmet. Alfred picked up on the location and basically says, hey, like go find him over there, right? So we end up basically picking up in the Gotham City Athletic Association, which is a condemned building. So obviously Joker would operate out of it. And once Red Hood gets up there, he actually pulls a crowbar out, which is cool. Once he gets into this place where this pool is, it's literally filled with bodies, right? Like it is littered with bodies. And he sticks a Q-tip down in there and it starts to hiss, right? So it looks like it's a pool filled with Joker toxin. They're using people as experiments to like use this toxin to achieve a goal. What that goal is, we don't know. Like presumably they're trying to recreate the chemical that made Joker into who he was at Ace Chemical. Presumably that formula has been lost, right, over some measure of time, or they're just making more of it. And so initially like this body kind of flies out and it's just sort of like, oh my God, like this person's infected. Joker kicks him back into the water and that guy's basically dead now. But then he's taken from behind by one of the Jokers, right? He's snatched up, and they're kind of like, we'd hoped you'd come. And you get this amazing, like probably the single best moment in this whole story. Jason Todd basically wakes up tied to a chair, right? And you have the criminal who's there. He's like, Jason Todd, petty thief. You should have been cuffed and arrested. But then Batman took you in to make you the second Robin. You were reborn. And then after your death, you were reborn again, right? That's the origin of Jason Todd summed up in 7 panels. But he says like things always happen in 3s. You had a life, you were killed, you came back to life, and now you're going to be reborn again, right? You've been reborn twice, time to be reborn a 3rd time. And it's one of these things where he responds and he's like, I killed one of those Jokers. I'm going to kill you too. And this version of the Joker just starts laughing almost maniacally. And then he responds, right? It looks like it's a painful experience. He responds to Jason and he says, I'll let you in on a secret about the Joker. It hurts when I laugh. Here's the thing. All right, I'm going to be honest with you guys. Here's the thing. I like the criminal. I like this version of the Joker the way that Jeff Johns write him. DC Comics, never use him again, right? Like never, ever, 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 ever bring him back or use him again, right? Like just let him stay like this. Keep him like this. Let this be the last time we ever see him, because if you do, some other writer is going to get their hands on him and they're going to screw it up. Do not do anything with the criminal Joker, right? So it's one of these things where Jason's kind of like, so you're telling me you're the real Joker. And that's when he chimes in and he says, who is the Joker really? And so it really seems to point at this idea that the Joker is not necessarily a person, the Joker's an ideology. And that's something that really DC's been pointing at for a number of years through various stories, right? Like Scott Snyder's New 52 run, Steve Englehart, you can even go all the way back, right? You can go all the way back during the era of like Dennis O'Neil and Neil Adams, right? That like the Joker's a concept, he's an ideology. The Joker represents chaos, and anybody can be the Joker if there's somebody who believes that chaos needs to be supreme. But for all intents and purposes, we as readers identify with the Joker as being a particular person, right? Like as being an individual who's running around doing things. But that's what makes this interesting, is because what happens if you have 3 individuals out there who all believe that Batman is bad and like chaos should reign supreme? All they have to do is make themselves look like the Joker, and then they are, right? Like that's really all it takes. And so they ask Jason the question, they say, why put on that helmet and call yourself Red Hood after what we did to you, right? Because Red Hood was the persona of the Joker before he became the Joker, right? In almost every single iteration of his character, he's been Red Hood before he was the Joker. And of course, having beat him to death, the response of Jason Todd is, it's a joke, right? It's a play on you. You killed me, so I'm going to become not necessarily you directly, but I'm going to become a mockery of what you stand for. And I'm going to, my goal is to basically fight alongside Batman, right? To use this thing that you consider to be so important, this representation of chaos, and become that, but become the opposite of that, to stand in line with Batman against you. And so it's one of these things where they're like, is it really a joke? Because like we left you with brain damage and permanent nerve pain, physical and emotional trauma so severe that the only relief you ever find is when you inflict pain on others. You and me, boy, we're more alike than you'd care to admit. And that is true. That's 100% true. The Joker finds satisfaction with hurting people. That's the nature of the Joker. He finds enjoyment in that. Now, usually it's part of some greater scheme, but he finds satisfaction in inflicting harm on others, specifically if the harm that he can inflict can affect Batman and get Batman to chase after him again. The Joker finds enjoyment out of that. And so the criminal kind of looks at Jason and says, like, you know that already, right? You nearly died and you blame the Batman for it. You hate him for it. And he says, I do too. Now, this seems to point at the origin of the Joker, seemingly this idea that all the origins of the Joker are the same, in the sense that he encountered Batman under some strange circumstance, whether it's because he was in the wrong place at the wrong time, what have you, but he was knocked into a vat of chemicals, and that led to him becoming who he was. But he almost died in that vat of chemicals. That's the Joker's stance, right? So that's why Red Hood and the Joker are so similar. It's one of these things where the Joker kind of says, you hate him most of all, right? Like you hate the Batman most of all because he's the reason why you are where you are. And he says Batman needs a better Joker. But simply put, you're not bright enough. You, the way you are not good enough. And so he says, tell me, Jason, does it hurt when you laugh? And then you basically end up having him cracked over the head with a crowbar again. Now, this is where things get kind of murky here, because the comedian starts cracking Jason Todd over the head and then starts saying, this really is more fun than it was the first time, right? So it looks like this is the version of the Joker that killed Jason Todd. Jeff Johns seems like he could be going back and forth. Now, it could also be that I'm remembering it wrong, right? But it seems like he's kind of going back and forth in between issue number 1 and issue number 2, which really really kind of begs the question, what if these are just 3 different versions of the same guy, right? Like 3 different personas or something like that, that are of seemingly the same individual, right? So like there's one Joker, there's the criminal element to the Joker, there's the clown element to the Joker, and the comedian element to the Joker, right? So the serious nature, the goofy nature, and the one who just does things for the fun of it. And then what if something happened and it just manifested into 3 different versions? We're not really given an answer here, right? We're just kind of guessing at this point in time. But we're back where seemingly Jason Todd's being cracked over the head. He basically says, you better make sure I stay dead this time, because if I don't, I'm gonna come back and I'm gonna kill you. And the Joker's like, no, what are you talking about? I'm rooting for you. I'm hoping you rise back up and you prove us wrong. I'm hoping you become the Joker, right? Cue to Barbara Gordon busting the door in alongside Batman, right? And once they get in there, they're immediately surrounded by like all these Joker guys, right? These Joker looking guys, you know, and initially, like, you know, it's kind of like they're not really Jokers. They're just kind of people who were taken in, who were basically, you know, who were victims, more or less. But the problem is that as they're attacking Batman, one of them hits his utility belt. And when that happens, it basically ends up calling in the Batmobile, which just comes flying into that location and actually kills a bunch of these guys. And so Batman's like, you know, like, we can still save some of them, you know, we can still save Jason. And it's kind of like, save me? Like, what are you talking about? Like, I'm not Jason. And that's one of these things where it looked like it was Jason Todd who was turned, but apparently it wasn't, right? He's like, I'm not, you know, right? Like, I'm not Jason, right? Like, you know, kind of Barbara Gordon freaking out, like, Jason, is that you? And it's like, no, that's not Jason. And so Jason Todd is not there, right? The pool's been drained. Jason Todd's not there. And then ultimately they, of course, end up locating it. Now, once they bring him in, Jason Todd has not really turned. He's not really the Joker, right? He just starts freaking out, going off on Batman. You know, Batman's like, are you all right? He's like, am I okay? Like, what do you think, right? Like, you did this to me. This is the second time I've been snatched up by the Joker and been beat to death. At least this time you made it in time, right? Like, you made it before I died, but you put me on this path. I'm in this life because of you. If it wasn't for you, I wouldn't be here, right? Like, I wouldn't be in this moment, in this time, living this life that I'm living right now. Like, he just wholly blames Batman. It's resent at his absolute worst. You know, I hate you for this. I hate you for the fact that you just buried me into the ground and then just replaced me with Robins willy-nilly without giving it a thought, right? Without even caring at all. And so Barbara Gordon steps up, and Barbara Gordon is like, okay, calm down. We just need to get you someplace safe. Now, of course, they end up taking him to Barbara's apartment, and then she starts screaming at Batman because Batman's like, I've got to go do stuff, like check out Gotham City, because I'm emotionally stunted. I'm super stoic, which is not a practical lifestyle to live, and I just don't really reveal my emotions to anybody because, you know, reason and logic, because that makes perfect sense. And so ultimately, Jason Todd, of course, wakes up realizing he's in the apartment of Barbara Gordon. He takes her book, Chronic Pain Management, right? So we can kind of learn how to cope with this chronic nerve pain that he experiences. And then once Barbara Gordon arrives, they kind of start having this heart-to-heart conversation. And the response of Barbara is, there's something that you have to understand, Jason. We all really thought you were dead. Everyone thought you were dead. Nobody knew that you were alive. If anybody had known you were alive, we would have come and found you. We would have moved heaven and earth. We would have burned down whatever town we had to get to. Batman would have taken out whoever he had to get to in order to find you. If we had known that you were alive, we would have been there by your side, grabbing you and bringing you back to a place that's safe. But it's one of these things where he just hadn't quite really picked up on that, you know? And it's one of these things where she's like, you know, we care about you. We all wish we had been there for you. And he kind of responds in saying that no one has ever said that to him. And she says she's saying it now. And the two of them actually share a kiss. Now, whether or not this will turn into something, I don't really know. And I'm a little weird about seeing like Jason Todd and Barbara Gordon kissing. It's a little strange to me because they're not really brother and sister, but they're kind of like adopted kids to a degree, like adopted brothers and sisters. So like a surrogate brother or a surrogate sister. Sister and brother is involved in their relationship in some way. And that's bad to, like, that's weird to me to see them like kissing. It's like, ugh. It's kind of gross. But, you know, Barbara Gordon immediately kind of puts it away. Says it was only a moment. No, like that's not going to happen. You know, like friend zone, like this, it's not going to happen, right? That's just not going to take place. And so you basically end up getting this kind of thing where Batman basically goes back, right? And he's looking at like all this information that he has at his disposal, right? Missing clowns, missing criminals, different things like that. Basically the Joker files, you know, and kind of skimming through this stuff and looking at this as best he can. Then suddenly something has something to do with Alaska, right? Like he picks up on something that has something to do with this place, right? With this state that's out there somewhere. And so you basically end up switching over to Joe Chill, who's been taken by the comedian, right? Taken by the comedian version of the Joker. He's basically snatched up and a video camera is put on him. And he says, okay, like lights, camera, action, time to talk. And he says, it's finally time to confess, Mr. Chill. Why did you really kill Thomas and Martha Wayne? Because apparently the reason that we got was not the reason that it happened. All right, what's going on, guys? This is Rob, and we are picking back up again with the Three Jokers. Yes, this is the conclusion to the Three Jokers storyline, right? Keep in mind that one of the Jokers is dead. The clown Joker is the one that was killed by Jason Todd. The criminal and the comedian are still alive, but in this video, we are going to find out which one of these Jokers is the real Joker, and it's amazing. It's such a great reveal. So initially, this kind of picks up with like Batman and Jason Todd and Barbara Gordon kind of conversing, right, about all the information that they've seen. Right, you know, the information that was kind of brought together, and the fact that the Joker wanted them to find all this stuff, right? The three Jokers wanted these guys, wanted these three to find all these things that are here. And so one of the things that was kind of established in the last video is that the Jokers are created. Two of these Jokers were artificially created, in the sense that we have one main Joker and then he created the other two. And so the idea is that if that's true, then the question is, which Joker is the real one, right? And that's really what they're trying to figure out. And one of the things that Jason Todd says is, whichever Joker is the real Joker, once I find them, like once I set my sights on him, there'll be no Jokers. I'm gonna kill him because you're too weak to do it, Batman. And when that happens, Bruce Wayne freaks out, right? Like he immediately loses it and starts going after Jason Todd. And the reason why, and this is what's so cool, I'm gonna be honest with you guys, this is what's so cool. I think this is the best that Jason Todd's been written in years. I'm just gonna say it. But one of the things that Batman gets pissed off about is like, do you really think that I haven't wanted to put a bullet in the brain of the Joker, right? Do you think I really didn't want to kill him after everything that he did, after what he did to you, after what he did to Barbara? Do you really think I didn't want to? And the response of Jason Todd is, but you didn't. Of all the talk that you have, you didn't do it. You wanted to, you could have, but you didn't. And that's one of the things that's interesting, right? Like whenever I make this point about how Batman should kill his villains, people usually kind of default to the slippery slope argument. I never really consider that a good argument. It's a fallacy because one, it assumes that you can't control yourself, right? It assumes that you can't say like, I'm just going to stop here. The problem with the slippery slope argument is that if you apply it to across the board and you say, okay, let's apply this slippery slope argument to anything, then we can say, okay, you should never have a single drink of alcohol in your life, because if you do, it's a slippery slope and you'll become an alcoholic. You should never smoke weed once in your life, because if you do, it's a slippery slope and you'll become a drug addict, right? That's the problem with the slippery slope argument, right? It assumes that Batman couldn't sit down and reason and say, okay, of all the villains that I have, Joker is by and far the worst because he just kills people indiscriminately for reasons that don't make sense to anybody but himself, but has something to do with the fact that he wants me to come and find him. And for every time I capture the Joker, he'll kill 100 people before I get him. So we should just kill him and be done with it. It assumes Batman can't define that reason, right? Batman can't say, okay, killing the Joker, that's basically where it stops, right? I can't justify killing the Penguin or anybody like that because they're criminals, right? They do some pretty shady stuff, but nobody's as bad as the Joker is. For the world's greatest detective, I have a hard time believing he'd be unable to stop at that line of logic. So that's why I never really paid any attention to the slippery slope argument and just kind of ignored it, because it's the argument you make when you can't make any other argument. But the crazy thing about this is that Batman basically says, like, you don't understand, right? Barbara Gordon tries to step in and kind of mediate things a little bit, but at the end of the day, they're both ignoring her. It's Jason Todd and Batman. And at the end of the day, Batman's like, you don't understand. You never have understood. Batman doesn't say it in so many words, but Jason Todd does not understand the effect it had on Bruce Wayne. And the reason why is because they're children to Bruce Wayne. They're his kids. That's just the plain and simple statement of the fact, right? Sure, Barbara Gordon has her dad, right? She's got Commissioner Gordon, but Batman sees them as children, especially Jason Todd, Tim Drake, and Dick Grayson. They're his kids. Like he took them on as wards. By all standards of measurement, he was their father or father figure, and he was there to make sure that no harm befell them. He knew the risk that he was taking here, but he also understood that they needed to have an outlet for their anger and their vengeance and their desire to destroy. They needed a good way to channel it, and the best way to channel it is to, one, allow them to help him on his missions, but two, to curb that desire for revenge into a desire to make people's lives better. And so along the way, Jason Todd kind of seemed to have gotten lost, but Jason Todd was beaten to death, and when Jason Todd came back and he was so angry at Batman because Batman didn't kill the Joker, Batman wanted to, but he didn't, because in his mind, it wasn't the right thing to do. And so the results of this is that you kind of have this little bit of a breakdown, right? That Batman runs over the criminal Joker and says he's very reminiscent of the Joker from the early days, like the old Bob Kane, Bill Finger Joker, right? Like the guy who was just really sadistic, really dark. The clown, of course, they faced at the aquarium and Jason Todd killed him. The comedian is the one where you see him laugh, but there's just something there, right? There's just kind of like this darkness dark sadistic streak behind the laugh and the smile and the eyes that just shows this guy is the worst of them all. He's the absolute worst of the Jokers, the most violent of all the Jokers. And so because of that, it's okay. One of these three is the original Joker. Maybe we already killed him in the aquarium. Maybe it's the criminal mastermind. Maybe it's the comedian, right? Maybe it's the most sadistic of them all. But whichever one it is, one of them is the real Joker. And so the question of Barbara Gordon is, maybe we finally find out. Right? Like maybe we find out the true origin of the Joker. And at the end of the day, like Jason Todd's like, maybe he's just some kind of a nobody, right? But where the question's asked, like Batman, do you know who the Joker is? Right? Like, do you know his name? The response of Bruce is no. If I did know, I would have told you already. And so what you end up doing is picking up in the aftermath of Joe Chill being kidnapped, right? We saw that in the last video that we did, in the last comic that we did, that Joe Chill was kidnapped from Blackgate Prison while he was basically going through medical treatment. And Batman immediately wants to see his cell. Now, here's the crazy thing, is Batman's going through these kind of books that were in the cell of Joe Chill. He came across letters that Joe Chill wrote, and none of the letters were ever mailed out, but they were all made out to Bruce Wayne. And so where he basically ends up going to see Reverend Evans, right? The guy who essentially runs the show, kind of, this priest, who helps them find repentance and things like that. He's not the warden, but the person that helps them, basically helps prisoners kind of discover who they really are, or allows them to repent, or whatever the case is. That when Batman's talking to him, he basically says, he says, no, like these letters were never mailed because they were never finished. He dropped out of school when he was 13. He was doing his best in his classes here, but his learning disabilities slowed him down, right? His inability to read at an effective rate, at an effective level, and that these letters that he wrote were long before he became ill. Because the thought of Batman, and Batman wants to deviate to the idea that Joe Chill is still just a bad person. It comforts him. And that's why Batman says, okay, so the whole reason he wrote these letters is because he got sick and he wanted to repent, right? Like he wanted to make sure he didn't go to hell when he died. And the response of Reverend Evans is no. He wrote those long before he fell ill, a long time before he fell ill. Now, the other part of this is you pick up with Barbara Gordon and you pick up with Dick Grayson while Batman's, inside talking to the Reverend. And Dick Grayson initially kind of hits up Barbara Gordon and says, look, I know I kind of screwed up here, right? Like I've put you guys in a rough position. But at the end of the day, he also tells her, like, we won't ever have anything like that again. And it's kind of an important thing here because it gives us a little bit of a softer side of Jason Todd. And so it's a little bit nuts there because the question the Reverend has is, what do they want with him, right? Like, why take Joe Chill in the first place, right? He's a dying man. Like, he literally has cancer. His days are numbered. And he basically says, like, I'm going to find out, because what he finds among all these letters is one that was obviously written by the Joker. And it basically has a ticket to the Mark of Zorro. And so again, that's at the Monarch Theater. That was the show that Batman and his parents, or Bruce Wayne and his parents, were going to see when they died, or had seen when they died. And so of course, Barbara Gordon and Bruce Wayne and Jason Todd show up here. And this begins what's probably the single greatest point in this whole story, the single greatest moment in this entire story, that when you have him show up, a movie begins to play. And this movie is basically like the comedian Joker talking to Joe Chill and saying, okay, kind of picking up where we left off in the last one, why did you really kill Thomas and Martha Wayne? I've read all your letters, I've read the minister's notes, you've seen the light, right? Your experiences and the suffering that you cause have touched your soul. They've touched your immortal soul, and you have looked to repent all of your sins. But answer something for me. Why did you kill Thomas and Martha Wayne, really? What was the motivation behind it? Now, Batman, of course, ends up kind of making his way through the theater as this movie's playing, and then finally comes across Joe Chill, who's currently being held by the criminal. And this is cool, because the criminal is not being written as like a crazy, goofy guy, right? That was one of the cool things about his character, is he's methodical. He thinks, he focuses, it hurts him to laugh, which I think is probably one of the greatest additions to the Joker mythos ever. But what he says here is their initial intention was to turn Jason Todd into the new Joker. But the problem with that is that Jason Todd lacks sophistication. And then they were going to take Barbara Gordon, but she's got too much heart, right? So he picked the killer. He picked Joe Chill. The intention is to turn Joe Chill into a new Joker. And it's one of the things that's kind of nuts here, is because while this little bit of a segment's happening between criminal Joker and between, Batman, that you've also got like the comedian Joker doing that interview with Joe Chill that they recorded and they're putting on the movie screen. And Joe Chill, to kind of nip this in the bud real quick so we can kind of focus on the meat and potatoes of this, Joe Chill, the reason why he killed Thomas and Martha Wayne is because he was struggling, he was down on his luck. And he saw them and he believed that people who were that rich are the reason why he was that poor. It was their fault. And so he wanted to take some of what they had in order to get himself back on his feet again, right? And the result of that was that once he got there and once he essentially went to go rob them, he suddenly realized that Bruce Wayne's there. And before he knew it, the gun was going off, right? The gun was going off and the result was that they were basically killed. But it wasn't until after everything that was going on that he realized that Thomas and Martha Wayne, which he already knew who they were, that they were actually people who were using their money to make Gotham City better, that they were looking to work against those individuals who used their wealth to buy politicians, to make laws in their favor, things like that. They were the good guys, and he killed two people who were actually looking to make Gotham better, who could have made his life better. But in his anger and in his selfishness, he kind of categorized them all the same. Everybody out there who's rich is the reason why I'm poor, right? And there really isn't a direct corollary between those two things. It's not necessarily because somebody's rich, you are poor, right? It's not necessarily that way, but Joe Chill saw it that way, and that's what led him to committing the act that he did. Now, that admission will become much more important later on down the line, but Batman initially approaches Joe Chill with the intention of freeing him, and Criminal Joker reveals he's got his whole chest strapped with dynamite. Now, that's a classic move for the Criminal Joker. If you go back and you read the old Bob Kane, Bill Finger stories, right? If you ever get your chance, you can buy them on, I think you can buy them directly from DC, or you can grab them on Comixology. You can go read those super old Batman stories, right? Batman number 1, number 2, number 3. Go read those really old stories with the Joker, and that's the kind of stuff he would do. And so you end up having, Barbara Gordon and Jason Todd facing off against like these kind of Jokerized people, right? These Jokerized individuals who are out there. But as Barbara Gordon's facing off against a couple of them, they both get shot. And when she initially believes it's Jason Todd, she turns around and it's the comedian Joker, the one who shot her, right? The one who shot her from Killing Joke, still wielding that same camera that he had. His outfit's different, but he's still got the same camera. And he's like, time for you to smile. And so it's like a great tribute to the Killing Joke, right? It's like an amazing tribute to the Killing Joke. And so the motivation behind creating a new Joker, and even the motivation behind the creation of these Jokers, is revealed when the criminal tells Batman he wants to be more. He needs to be everything to Batman. The biggest issue that he has with Batman is he's not his main focus. Now that's a common point that Joker's had over the years. It's not something Jeff Johns is making up on the spot. That's been the motivation behind Joker for years, for eons and eons and eons, that he wants to be the one that Batman focuses on. He wants to be the center of Batman's life. He almost, in kind of a sadistic and screwed up way, sees Batman as like a lover. It's a dissatisfaction, right? The fact that he doesn't have Batman focusing on him in that way leaves him dissatisfied. And so initially Batman's response is, Joe Chill's a sick, dying old man. Of what use would he be to you? And that's when Criminal Joker says, I'm willing to bet that this little bath will put him into remission. I'm willing to bet if we dunk him in this water, that it's going to cure his cancer. It'll make him insane, but it'll cure his cancer, and he will be one of us. And that's kind of the crazy thing here, right? That's kind of the crazy situation. Because right now, this Criminal Joker defines the concept of the Joker as an undefined chaos. We're just absolute chaos. There's no rhyme and reason to us being like, you don't see us as like a form and a function, right? You don't see us as we truly are, that we are the antithesis to you. Instead, you see us as just like crazy guys who implement some schemes and do some things, and all hell pops off for a little while, and then things go back to normal, right? Like you capture us and then we go to jail, and that's basically it. But I need to be more. We as a Joker need to be more. And so at that point, like literally Joker pulls out a Tommy gun, goes to shoot Batman. Of course, Batman dodges out of the way, but in the process, the ropes start to snap. The Joker falls, the lighter falls out of his hand, and ends up landing in this vat of chemicals, which of course turns this great big huge chemical thing on fire. And so in that moment, when Criminal Joker goes to fight Bruce Wayne, you've also got the comedian Joker facing off against Barbara Gordon. And it's just kind of like, I haven't had this much fun in a long time, and we're just getting started. And when part of the roof begins to collapse, and it doesn't quite kill Barbara Gordon then, but when part of the roof starts to collapse, the comedian ends up bailing out, right? He ends up taking off. And so you've got the Criminal Joker facing off against Batman. He goes to cut the wire so that Joe Chill will fall inside the burning chemical bath, right? Like the water has to be on fire in order for it to fully affect, right? In order for it to fully take effect. But he cuts him loose, and then Batman saves Joe Chill. And that's a crazy thing, is the criminal was not relying on Batman saving Joe Chill, that he was kind of relying on Batman's hatred of Joe Chill to just let him die, right? Now, I wouldn't necessarily say that Batman saves Joe Chill because he's just like, I don't kill, I don't let anybody die. I think it's really more of Batman saves Joe Chill because he doesn't want to deal with another Joker. I think that's really what kind of goes on here. But of course, he ends up swinging back into action, going after the criminal again, and then once the criminal's temporarily knocked out, Joe Chill kind of looks at Batman and is like, I know who you are. They talk about you in Blackgate, and you know what I did in this place. Are you going to kill me? And it's a little bit ambiguous here, right? It's a little bit ambiguous here. It's one of these things where Joe Chill almost kind of wants Batman to kill him. I guess it's not really ambiguous. He says, I deserve it, but it's almost kind of like he wants Batman to kill him. But the cool thing about this is Joe Chill is exceedingly remorseful for his actions. And that's an important thing, because Batman's initial response is like, no, I'm not going to kill you. And that's when Joe Chill's like, I deserve it. I'm truly sorry for what I did. This combined with Batman's knowledge of the fact that Joe Chill had written these letters before he became sick indicates that he really is remorseful. He's not remorseful because he's on his last days. He really does feel terrible about what he he did, because Joe Chill, 1, turned the life of Bruce Wayne upside down, and 2, doomed Gotham. He made Gotham what it is by getting rid of Thomas and Martha Wayne and allowing corruption among the police and among politicians and among the ultra wealthy to run supreme. He made Gotham the way that it is. He single-handedly screwed up the whole town. And so it's kind of crazy because, of course, the bricks start to fall and then Batman rescues him again. And, he says, thank you. And Batman's like, you're welcome. But in that moment, the criminal pops back up again, right? And he says, like, I'd hope to extend this game more, but now we all go together, right? And gets ready to pull this stick of dynamite, and he's shot by the comedian, right? The comedian shoots him in the head and says, and then there was one. Take me away, Bats. Arrest me and take me away. Now, the big question here is, why even kill him? Why even kill him in the first place? Why kill the criminal? Well, the reason for this comes after Barbara Gordon and Jason Todd share a moment where Jason Todd's kind of pissed about Batman just kind of sitting him back to the Batcave, that he also asked Barbara Gordon, is there really a chance about us, right? Because remember, like, they shared a kiss, and Barbara's like, no. He gets friend zoned basically. He's like, you'd make a really good friend, I don't know what to tell you. I don't feel that way about you, right? He just basically gets shut down. And so, of course, the two of them end up going their separate ways temporarily, but Batman starts having a conversation with the Joker. And the Joker says, like, he's literally, see now, after all of that drama, don't you feel better, Bruce, right? Bruce Wayne, Barbara Gordon, Jason Todd, I know, but I don't care. I'm not going to tell anybody, right? The world can never know your true name. You might stop doing this if I do, right? If I tell people who you really are, right? You might quit. And that really kind of solidifies a lot of what was established in Scott Snyder's New 52 Batman run, that the Joker doesn't care about Bruce Wayne's identity as Batman, that what he cares about is the cat and mouse game, that they chase each other around. They just go round and round and round in circles. The funny thing about this is when Batman asks the question, what is it that you want, right? The Joker says, what do I want? Certainly not what the others did. The clown, your troubled Robin, put a bullet in. All he wanted to do was laugh at the suffering of others. How common, right? And the criminal, that old man, was so delusional. This whole great big idea of creating a better Joker, well, that's just lunacy, right? A defined Joker, one with a name and identity, that ruins the very definition of me. That's why I regret making him. Or he says, does he regret making me? The reality of this, if I'm really a betting man here, this is the original Joker. The comedian is the original Joker. And this comes in a couple different ways. Like where Batman says, what's the punchline? The Joker says, that's the point. There's no final twist, right? Not until I decide to put my knife into your heart. But he says the criminal was absolutely wrong. I am chaos, right? I'm the devil. I'm nothing and everything to you. The Joker is not the one who's broken. It's Batman who's broken. All of this was basically my plan. Batman was broken by a greater pain than any of us could ever inflict on you. And so I convinced them that making Joe Chill the new Joker would be the best idea, right? The man who destroyed Gotham, the man who destroyed you, making him into the Joker, into like another Joker, would crush you, right? It would destroy you on some level in a way that I never really could. And the irony behind all this is he says, like, you saved the man who killed your parents, who sent the city literally spiraling down into despair. This man apologized to you, which is exactly what you needed to hear. And so because of me, your greatest wound has been healed. And so now I can be your greatest pain. I will cut you. I'll hurt you. I'll destroy your life in every conceivable way that I possibly can. Because now I am your only real focus. You're dealt with, Joe Chill. You dealt with that pain and that struggle and that anger that you've been carrying around all your life. That wound is now healed. Now there's the wounds that I can create. I can become your source. I can become your source of anger and your source of pain. I can become the thing that you hate the most in this world. I am now your main focus. That was the whole plan behind this, right? That was the whole basis behind this. It's an amazing reveal. But Bruce Wayne, of course, goes to visit Joe Chill and basically accepts Joe Chill's apology, right? The two of them actually end up holding hands, which is a massive moment. And he actually holds the hand of Joe Chill as he dies. And so while Batman didn't necessarily tell Joe Chill in that alleyway, I forgive you, this is Bruce Wayne appearing to Joe Chill as Joe Chill needed for Bruce Wayne to appear to him and say, I forgive you for what you've done. Forgiveness is what Bruce Wayne needed to heal himself, and it's what Joe Chill needed to finally be able to come to terms with what it was that he did. Joe Chill, of course, dies and he ends up being buried, and then Bruce Wayne ends up traveling to Alaska. And he basically says, he kind of has this little bit of a statement, the world can never know your true name. You end up having this bit of a conversation that Batman has with Alfred. Now, there is also a letter that Red Hood leaves for Barbara Gordon and says that, like, I want to make a change, right? But I can't do that without you. Basically, like, it's a confession of love. It's a confession of love that he needs Barbara Gordon. The problem is, like, the letter falls off the wall and ends up being swept away by just some random guy, so she never gets the letter. And Jason Todd says, I'll never bring it up. If you never say anything to me, then I'll assume you tore the letter up and threw it away, and I'll never ask you about it. If you never come to me and talk about it, I'll never come to you. And I'll assume that if you never came to me and talked to me about it, that you didn't want to be a part of my life in that way, that you didn't want to love me in that way, that you didn't want us to become something. It's actually tragic, right? It's insanely tragic, right? Because if I'm being honest, as weird as it is that Robert Gordon and Jason Todd kiss because they're kind of like adopted brother and sister, I guess I could kind of ship them, see them going together. I don't really know. But Batman ends up having a conversation with Alfred. And the crazy thing about this is you basically have Bruce Wayne talking to Alfred and saying, I don't mean to sound the way that people think I do, but like, I'm Batman, right? I knew the Joker's name 1 week after we first met. I've known his identity the entire time. And then you get these little moments, these little scenes that come from the Killing Joke. And basically, like, you end up having the wife of the Joker, where in the Killing Joke, the explanation to the Joker's wife was that he died. The reality of this is that it looks as though that's not true, that she was actually sent away because it looked like she would never, ever be free of the Joker. How the nature of these two guys consolidates with the way they were depicted, right? Because they refer to the Joker as like sir, different things like that. Doesn't quite make a whole lot of sense, but anyway, she's basically talking to cops, and you end up having her basically escorted away. Essentially, it looked like her death was faked, right? But she ends up getting away from the Joker before he became the Joker, and she ends up traveling to Alaska, where she's been this entire time with her kid that she's raising. And so what this points to, and what I'm going with this, is the real Joker. Out of all three of these guys, the real Joker is the Killing Joke Joker. The criminal Joker and the clown Joker, they were created by the comedian, right? They were created by him, and that they're not actually Jokers. They were just two random guys out there who, for whatever reason, the comedian Joker chose. So the comedian is the true Joker, right? The origin of the Killing Joke is the actual origin of the Joker, right? And it makes sense. That's the one that fans go with the most, but that's where things stand right now. Killing Joke Joker, that story is the original origin of the Joker. He is the original Joker, right? So with that being said, guys, we're gonna bring this video to an end. If you are new here to Comics Explained, make sure you guys hit the sub button to become part of the Rob Corps. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you drop a like. Now we'll catch you all later. Peace.